Number 10, Goodbye Miami. Over spring break 2019, Mariah Logan spent 3 days with her friends in Miami. She was heading back to the airport around 4:30 a.m. to go home to Chicago early Sunday morning. The 23-year-old decided it would be a good idea to hang out the window of their rented Hyundai Accent as they drove down the highway. Logan screamed out a loud goodbye to Miami while hanging out the window. Moments later, she fell out onto the road and was hit and killed by a Range Rover that was coming from behind. The driver of the SUV initially stopped but then fled before authorities arrived on the scene, turning the situation into a hit and run. This sparked a homicide investigation. While this happened, Mariah's friends who were still in the car called Logan's boyfriend, Roy Alden, to tell him the devastating news. It was clear when he spoke with reporters from the Miami Herald that he was heartbroken by his girlfriend's tragic death. He said they had the next 5 years of their future planned out before Logan's life was suddenly cut short. Mariah's friends were equally upset and supposedly threw themselves onto the pavement in shock as police searched the highway for the driver of the Range Rover who killed their best friend. As of now, the suspect is still at large. Number 9, The Cult. While on spring break in Matamoros, Mexico in 1989, Mark Kilroy became a victim of the infamous Palo Mayombe cult, led by the serial killer Adolfo Costanzo. He became separated from his friends while out partying one day. His friends looked for him for hours and eventually figured that he'd hooked up with someone and would come back in the morning. When they woke up, there was still no trace of Kilroy. Meanwhile, Serafin Hernandez and Malio Ponce Torres, 2 men impersonating police officers, had kidnapped the young American student. Both were members of Costanzo's narco cult and were looking for a victim to sacrifice. Kilroy was tortured all night until the cult leader decided to kill him viciously by chopping off his head. Parts of his body, including his brain and spine, were then placed in the Nanga cauldron. The participants in the human sacrifice ceremony were said to get mystical powers such as protection from police interference. Cult members were eventually captured after an unrelated investigation. They confessed to Kilroy's murder, believing they would be protected from punishment by the Nyanga's dark powers. They reportedly believed they would be spared any consequences at all. Along with Kilroy, 15 more mutilated bodies were discovered. The cult's 14 members were accused of a slew of offenses, including but not limited to murder and drug trafficking. Costanzo and a few of his comrades fled to Mexico City. Costanzo ordered one of his followers to shoot him and his male lover after a difficult confrontation with police. They both died, and the cult leader was never brought to justice for his indescribably heinous acts. Number 8, Too Much. Molly Ammon was a freshman at the University of Florida when she decided to spend spring break at the Madeira Beach with a group of her buddies from school. Her friends stated that she drank beer and other liquor at the party. Molly was so drunk that she couldn't walk, so her friends decided to carry her to bed so she could sleep it off overnight. But she didn't wake up the next morning. When the others went to check on her, they realized she was unresponsive. Molly's autopsy revealed a blood alcohol content of over 0.4, which is 5 times the state's legal limit of intoxication. She was barely 19 years old when she died from alcohol poisoning. Several public awareness efforts were launched in the aftermath of her death, intended to reassure spring breakers they could contact 911 without the fear of disciplinary action if a friend needed assistance. Angie Ammon, Molly's sister, also started a Facebook group called Molly Ammon Spring Break Awareness to warn other families about the dangers of excessive competitive drinking at spring break and other similar parties. She said that she would love for the message to simply be not to drink at all, but she doesn't believe it's possible for all college-age kids to cut out that vice so easily. So she is attempting to promote self-awareness as well as observation for those who might need help. Number 7, Diving In. In 2019, Yuzi Wang, a 24-year-old Michigan State University student, traveled to the fabulous Puerto Rico during his spring break. He wanted to do all the main tourist activities. He even met a lady friend along the way that wanted to tag along with him on his adventures. One of the activities he planned was a hike to a beautiful waterfall. When they finally got to the waterfall in Gonzalodilla in San Sebastian, Wang dived into the water by himself. It was a pretty high jump to take at nearly 60 feet or just about 18 meters. Tragically, Wang never came out. Witnesses called the police, and despite the fact that the first responders arrived quickly, there was nothing they could do to save him. His body was recovered, and an investigation was launched to narrow down the circumstances surrounding his death. The autopsy revealed that the student simply drowned. He never tried to swim back to shore, and it's been suggested that alcohol may have played a major role in the incident. Number 6, Cold Case. High school student Denise Flum attended a bonfire party one night during spring break back in 1986. She made it home safely, but realized she had forgotten her purse. Tired from the night, Denise decided to just wait and look for it the next morning. The next day, she got into her Buick Regal and drove away to find her missing purse. She would never be seen or heard from again. Her parents were worried when hours passed by and she had not come back home. Her car was found on a nearby rural farm, which stoked an investigation. There was no trace of where she could have possibly gone. The police suspected Denise had been kidnapped since there was no corpse or any other evidence to suggest that she had been murdered. The search continued, but with nothing to find, it soon went cold. In 2020, a suspect was finally apprehended. Sean McClung, who had dated Denise for 3 years, was charged with voluntary manslaughter. He died just 3 months after confessing to the murder of his ex-girlfriend all those years ago. Number 5, sneaking out. In 2009, 17-year-old Brittany Drexel snuck out of her home in Rochester, New York for a spring break trip to South Carolina with her friends. She had asked her mom if she could go and was told no, but Brittany didn't listen to her mom and went anyway. A few days into the vacation, Brittany left the hotel she and her friends were staying at to visit a friend about 1.5 miles or just under 2.5 kilometers up the road. Surveillance footage would later show that she entered a resort and left just a little while later. Not long after this, Brittany stopped texting her boyfriend, John Greco. He started getting worried and called her friends to ask if they could check on her, but they didn't know where she went either, so Greco called Brittany's mom, Dawn, and Dawn immediately called the police. Authorities determined that Brittany's cell phone last use was in the early morning after her disappearance between 80 to 97 kilometers south of Myrtle Beach. Right after, the device was either shut off or it went dead. Cops interviewed a nightclub promoter the group had met, but were unable to classify him as a suspect or rule him out completely. Dawn wasn't giving up though, and she even moved to the area so that she could search for Brittany, whom she suspected had fallen victim to human trafficking. The FBI, on the other hand, concluded that she had likely been murdered and offered a $25,000 reward for information that could help with solving the case. 2 jailhouse informants claimed they saw her being abused at the home of a man named Timothy Taylor. They claimed Taylor had initially tried selling Brittany to sex traffickers, but later, Taylor decided to kill her instead when her missing person report started going viral. He was never charged despite failing a polygraph test. Last year, Taylor's mother told the press that she wants people to stop associating her son's name with Brittany's disappearance, arguing that there's no actual compelling evidence against him in the case. No arrests have been made. Do you think Brittany deserves justice? Let us know in the comments down below. If you like the video so far, be sure to subscribe to see more videos from us. Number 4, almost home. During spring break in 1996, a mysterious murder went down in Daytona Beach, Florida. Mark Fike of Belleville, Ontario was only 18 years old at the time he was killed. He was on vacation and was only 1 night away from catching his bus back home. He called his mother from a payphone to let her know how things were going. That's when 17-year-old John Rainey approached him from behind. The teen pulled out a gun and threatened Mark with it. Rainey had recently escaped from jail and demanded Mark hand over his wallet. His mother heard a disturbance in the background of the call, but Mark hung up and told her he had to go suddenly. He refused to give up his money, telling Rainey to shoot him in the head instead. So John gave him what he asked for. Mark's best friend rushed to his side and tried to stop the bleeding, but nothing could be done. It was too late. Mark was dead by the time police arrived. Soon after, John Rainey and 2 accomplices were captured, and he is currently serving a life sentence in jail as of 2020. The news of the tragic shooting rang through in Canada, notably in Belleville, a lakeside town where Fike lived as a high school student. The murder was noteworthy, and its news spread like wildfire, resulting in a reduction in Canadian tourists to Daytona Beach. Canadians just do not visit Florida as much as they did after the tragic events of 1996. Number 3, ECSTASY. A college student who went missing in 2015 after a spring break party was found dead near a water park in southern Texas. The body of Jordan Britton, 20, from Killeen, Texas, was discovered in a marsh nearly 1 week after his disappearance on a Friday. Mr. Britton was found wearing nothing but his underwear, and police say that they had recovered drugs from the student's car before the incident. Jordan Britton died in a car accident while on a spring break trip to South Padre Island, Texas. He'd become separated from his friends he was vacationing with, and witnesses reported seeing him walking around looking like a lost sheep. His body was partially immersed in wetlands near the resort where he had been staying. The autopsy found that he died as a result of immersion hypothermia and drowning. The doctors also stated Britton died from acute drug intoxication location. Investigators searched the victim's car for any other information that could have explained the incident and discovered designer ecstasy pills, which likely played a big role in Jordan's untimely death. Number 2. The Plunge. In 2016, Tyler Douglas Gilmore was on spring break with a bunch of buddies in Panama City Beach like a million other college students. He'd been drinking extensively and was extremely intoxicated when he was last seen. He slipped off late that night, but his friends were too busy partying to notice him gone. The 20-year-old wound up in a parking garage, but how he got there was a mystery. He was hurt in a fall and died as a result of his injuries. It would be several hours before a passing motorist found him lying on the ground and called for help. Gilmore had been dead for at least 2 hours when the cops finally got there. Authorities did not specify the height from which the young man had fallen. His death was ruled an accident with no foul play expected. Number 1. Deadly Tractor. In 2019, 21-year-old Meg Maurer was driving down a Mississippi highway when she pulled over at a rest stop. The New Orleans student was on spring break and she was supposed to graduate in a little less than 3 months. Maurer was walking along the parking lot with her friends when a tractor trailer passed them by. The vehicle suffered a bizarre accident where it lost a set of tires weighing up to 500 pounds each, or just about 225 kilograms. They slammed into Maurer, killing her instantly on impact. The police investigated the accident and decided that the tractor-trailer driver was not guilty of misconduct. He came to a complete stop as soon as the tires slid off. Maurer's mother told reporters that she wanted someone to blame, but she knew it was a rare tragedy and that no one had acted carelessly or maliciously. Thanks for watching. What's the craziest spring break experience you've had? Tell us in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time on The Bad Badger.